So hi everybody. It's probably time to start, as we'll still do some signing for attendance. It doesn't matter. My name is Andrej. I came from the company CISCO Systems. Somebody of you might know the company, somebody not. CISCO Systems is focusing on networks, computer networks, and services all around the computer networks, like security, that's my field, and collaboration, data center, platform as it is. And now we do everything software defined. So maybe next presentation might be about that, if you like, the idea that we can do computer networks defined by the software now. But today, the topic is zero trust architecture. As I said, my main focus is cybersecurity and a little bit of a cloud services as well and stuff, but everything related to security. This topic within cybersecurity is quite popular now, and it's very important as well. You will see it's not new concept. It's pretty old, but it's even more relevant nowadays as it was before. If you have any questions, just don't be hesitate to interrupt me while I'm talking. It's completely okay. I know not all of you are fully technical, so I'll try to do this presentation more like you will get the idea of zero trust architecture, what is it about, and what we are thinking this way when we are building the computer networks. That's very important to say, with the big customers, with the big enterprise companies, because this is not like a home-related issue. It might be a home-related issue as well, but it's not that huge in home or cafeteria environment as with the enterprise companies. So what we are going to talk about, I'll try to say or try to explain was the traditional security model and was the zero trust, and what are the differences, just to understand why zero trust is important and what are the elements of the architecture of the model. We will go through zero trust model as it is. We will see what we can do today and what are the part of the concept of zero trust architecture. And in the end, I have just in a couple of steps I'd like to show you how we do it in practice, or what stands behind that, what kind of solutions, and how we use those solutions in a, let's say, corporate world. Once you will go with the titles to the working life, and it will be employed by some huge organization, you will be part of that as well, for sure. So let's have a look how IT landscape is shifting. Have you ever heard about the perimeter? That there is some network perimeter with like a border in between some two worlds, like an internal corporate world and the external, like the internet. So we call that network perimeter. And usually in the past, or with the many organizations nowadays as well, they are taking care of their perimeter. They have some policies inside that. They use some security boxes, some security solutions on that perimeter, usually something like a firewall, you might know, or email, web gateways, like security gateways, which are trespassing the traffic and inspecting the traffic, looking for some breach, some malicious code, or some corrupted files, which might basically make your network get into danger. And it's basically what we call protection. And we have more ways how to protect. We can do it actively, passively, and so on. But the perimeter is important part, because when we say network perimeter, everyone at the moment will think, yeah, the network perimeter is where my router is positioned, and basically where my internet service provider is bringing the connectivity to my company. But that's pretty nice and easy to say. But basically, this is not true anymore. And if we use this approach, we'll get infected and breached very fast. What is behind the perimeter and inside the perimeter? Behind the perimeter, we have remote users. There are like employees who take their laptops or mobile devices and working from cafeteria or from home. There are remote users. We have personal mobile devices and personal devices who are pretty intelligent now. We are bringing them to the company, so that's something external as well. It doesn't belong to the company. We have a lot of IoT devices. You probably heard of that abbreviation, IoT, Internet of Things, which is basically stands for devices which are not like computer or mobile phone. They might be cameras. They might be some special devices built for, I don't know, sensors and stuff like that. In the production area, in the industry, we used to use a lot of IoT devices. Or if you come to healthcare sector as well, there are no traditional things, but they are using the operational systems as well. They are providing some kind of services, and they are also connected to the network, as they are not standard. As for example, they are not operated by Windows or Mac-OS and stuff like that, which are pretty much under control, and they have a lot of developers behind that who are always producing patches and updates and stuff like that. So they don't have many vulnerabilities. They have some, of course, all the time, but not that many. These IoT devices are much more special, and not many people are behind that, and we have to be even more careful when we're using IoT devices in our network. Nowadays, we use a lot of cloud services. I'm pretty sure most of you use cloud services right now, like, I don't know, Dropbox or something else, Spotify. You're also streaming music from somewhere. The somewhere is the data center who is not sitting in this room, in your pocket or in your bag, but it's sitting probably in another country. You're streaming, you're using that service. Those are cloud services. And basically, when we come to enterprise world, those cloud services are even more huge. Like enterprise companies are now renting resources for servers and other things like that, and they are basically running the applications in a cloud and using those services from the site. They are not having them on-prem in their own data centers. And once we are thinking this way, where the perimeter is, because this is the standard, most of the employees now in progressive companies are remote. Companies are now providing to employees with the freedom, like they can work wherever they want, whenever they want. So this is kind of a standard now. So we have to think about the perimeter and about the network perimeter different ways. What are the challenges? The challenges are, there are a lot of challenges with this. How do we know the users are who they say they are? This is a pretty important thing. Their devices, are they secured? Are they with the latest updates? Are they using some, for example, antivirus, something like that? You know, each device who is brought to my company inside the perimeter, it's basically the risk for me, because someone is using, I don't know, their own iPad at home in, let's say, not secured environment. You can get some malicious software, whatever, very easily. You're not protected. If you bring that to my company, you bring me that to my network, right? So we have to be sure about all of these. We have to check those devices. We have to look for the vulnerabilities, and so on. this is all impacting the business. And I'm not going through those details, like 81% of breaches involve the weak stolen passwords and like that. There are a lot of different events which might happen when the company is breached. Like stolen passwords is just one. It's just like a one of hundreds of different security events which might happen. The more important thing is the traditional security is not efficient enough anymore, so we have to think about the perimeter different way. I have one short example how it might looks like. There might be someone who is interested in something which you own within your network. It might be your intellectual property. It might be some information, personal information about your employees, about your business, and so on. And the guy with the interest has a lot of resources now, how he can investigate and find out the way how to get into your network inside your perimeter. One of those things, or one of the ways, might be phishing email. Phishing email is pretty easy thing, and it works for like 20 years already. They can build an email form which might be very similar or almost the same like the original, and the user who received that email basically doesn't have much suspicion, or he's not much suspicious about the originality of that email, and he or she is clicking on the links without more thinking, right? Once the user inside the perimeter, my own employee, is clicking the link, you can get the malicious code to the workstation, and that code might be autonomous from that time or from that very first moment. Once the malicious code is inside the network, it can spread through the network very easily. We have a lot of protocols who are now autonomously sharing the information within the network, like SMB and the others. And this lateral movement can basically infect my entire network in a seconds or in minutes, in hours, very fast. Once the malicious code is spread through the network, on the more computers I have there, it can basically be reactivated from the server, which might even not sit in my network, then just communicate somewhere, get the instructions, and do what they want. It can, I don't know, cipher the data or creep the data on my data storage, or it can basically look for the information. It can do the password harvesting and so on. Once this is done, the gained information is sent to the attacker, and attacker is usually use that information and monetize it, right? So this might be the process. It's very easy, and unfortunately, it's quite often case nowadays. What is zero trust, and what's the history about that? As I said, the perimeter is still like a word or the phrase which is used for tens of years. Tens like 2 tenths, probably, because if we go further, or if we go more to the past, there were actually no computer network. But I would say 20 years we're talking about the network perimeter, and we're trying to define the area. And in year 2004, there was a Jericho forum where all where all the chief security officers came to one place, and they started talking about the challenge they have. Like they started talking about the deperimetrization. There was the first idea how to get rid of view and the initial concept that we can actually build a network behind the four walls, and everything inside is going to be secured, and outside is going to be isolated. They were talking about that quite efficiently. The idea was born in 2010. There was the first mention of zero trust. It was defined by Forrester agency. Later on, 2014, also Google published the studies about, or which were basically related to this topic. They named that Beyond Corp. And later on, we went through, it evolved even more. We were actually seeing the zero trust extended. Then Gartner was extended this idea a little bit more. They used to call it CARTA, or continuous adaptive risk and trust assessment. But it was still this. We have to think about the perimeter different ways. Today, zero trust architecture is starting to be the general term. And why is it like that? There were some examples in the beginning of the presentation, and I will show you what is the simple idea of it. The simple idea is secure how someone or something is accessing your work assets, is getting into network. To get a visibility, someone, it might be employee, contractor, partner, vendor, and so on, something, it might be all those devices these users are using, and work asset, it's basically everything, all the resources we are working with during the process or the production which we are asked to produce by our employees. Zero trust really means like a least privilege access. How to think about it? Least privilege access is something that we have to be aware, we have to know who is accessing my network, with which devices, or what are the devices they are using, and we have to get the privilege access by meaning the access should be set for the particular resources which might be allowed to me as a specific person. So if I'm receptionist, we don't use receptionist anymore. There are like lobby ambassadors now. So if I'm lobby ambassador, I should have access to, for example, I don't know, people directory for the organization. So if someone is looking for some people from my organization, I should be able to access the database, look for the guy, for the lady, and be able to contact or to ask to come to the reception, right? But if I'm the lobby ambassador, I shouldn't have the access to business applications or to data center where the other applications which shouldn't be accessed by the lobby ambassador are positioned. So simply saying is like that, but the idea is even more. We should start to focus on data protection, not on attacks itself. Why data protection? Usually the data is the most valuable part of my network. So what my employees are producing, those are some informations who are transferred to data, and I store the data, I use the data, and if someone wants to breach my network, they usually try to steal my data. So we should think and focus on the data protection. Zero trust architecture is saying, or getting an idea, assumes that all environments are hostile and breached. So even if it's my own organization and I'm the admin of the cybersecurity for the organization, I have to be a little bit more paranoid, and I have to think about that environment that it's already hostile and it's already breached. So I should always be suspicious about everyone who is accessing or who is using some services in my network. No access until user and device is proven trusted. So we have various solutions who can provide with these services. I'll show you some of them later. And authorize and encrypt all transactions and the flows. So you're probably aware of around 80% of internet, like regularly used websites, and let's say famous websites, are encrypted now. So when you use some website and you put the URL and you see HTTPS, it means it is encrypted, and everything, all the transfer data, which is basically from the client to the destination and vice versa, it is encrypted. And this approach should be also applied even more importantly within the organizations. So someone is sending some messages, internal chat, internal communication, and even more, we are thinking about data which which applications are changing. All those should be encrypted. When we come to requirements, the requirements are pretty hard. And as I said, we should see the network as it's seriously is the jungle, and we have to be aware, and we have to be basically informed about everything that's happening there. External and internal threat exists all the time. There are no gaps where I'm completely safe and I can do some windows or whatever. Every device, application, user, and network flows is authenticated and authorized. Automation systems are what are zero trust network to be built and operate. So we cannot do that manually. All those things, we have to do some automated services and automated procedures. And those policies who are allowing us to keep that under control has to be dynamic, that's for sure. Because if we have some static politics for that, we'll get lost very fast. All activity is locked. That's nothing to say about that. This is like a little bit more graphical, what I was saying previously. There is a device which my employee is using. There is the process, applying the solutions I have for this reason. And there is something on the right side which is basically acceptable for me. So if the device are going through the process and is compliant, I can basically pass it to my network. If there is a user who is authenticated and authorized to use some resources in my network, it is passed into network. If there are data who are transferred from outside to my network and it's scanned and inspected and it's clean, it might go through my network, sorry. And if there is some other network connected to my network, all the transfers has to be encrypted with a seriously high enough level of encryption, which basically for us now TLS 1.3 is sufficient enough. Do you have any idea what BYOD means, or MFA, or the TLS encryption?
The first one is bring your own device.
Bring your own device? Yeah, I'll tell something about it. Bring your own device is also one of the services or similar like mobile device management or something like that. This is actually allowing us to identify the personal asset. Like imagine you would like to use your own cell phone or your own laptop or tablet within the company environment, but employee is let's say restricted enough or restrictive enough to allow that because of all those risky things we were talking about before. There are solutions like BYOD or MDM who actually can identify those devices at the moment when they are trying to connect to the network. We can use various methods for that, like identifications, certifications for certificates for identification. We can use some personal accounts for identification and so on. So we are talking about identity. MFA is multi-factor authentication. You might know that from Facebook or Google. So if you have some authenticator which is generating one-time password, and it's more than the first factor of authentication, that's MFA. So within the example in the end of the presentation, I have a solution which is working with that, and I'll show you a little bit more in deep how does it work. Encryption, the level of encryption is based on the algorithm which is behind that. Usually you might heard about SSL. The SSL, we don't use it anymore, it's pretty old, but there are more newer versions, we call TLS, sorry, and the current one, or the most used one at the moment, is 1.3. I was talking about zero trust so far, and we're gonna hear more about that. But there are various architectures or various approaches which we are applying when we are building design and architecture for our customers these days. The trust-centric is the right side. It's a very important one. From your perspective, the left side is a threat-centric. Basically, these two concepts are hand by hand, and we are using both of them. Usually, the threat-centric is the basic security, where you have to be able to use, or you have to be able to scan and inspect the traffic with sufficient solution to find out if there is some threat or malicious traffic inside that or not. And you can basically do the prevention, detection, and also something the event happen. Like if there is some breach to my organization, I have to have some solutions, some tools how to remediate the environment after the attack. Trust-centric is position us to very first part of that process, like not even prevention, but it's the basic approach how we can get the visibility of those users and devices and the processes within my network. So if I have threat-centric model or threat-centric approach applied, it's pretty fine. That's most of the organization are doing this nowadays. But threat-centric is even more important, because I cannot secure what I don't see, right? So as I said, the zero trust term or zero trust approach, it's not new. It's around 15 years old. There were some original three pillars, let's say, which defined that previously. Eliminate network trust, so I don't trust anyone, I don't trust anything in my network. I assume all traffic, regardless of location, is dangerous, and I have to do authorized, and I have to do inspect and secure everything. When I look to the segmentation is about divide the network to the different parts and apply the policies and the procedures for the different specific parts of my network differently. When I'm talking about different segments of my network, you can imagine network is one group, but in the group I have various and specific devices in it, like the printers, shouldn't sit in the same segment as my, I don't know, personal computers of my accountants. Accountants should not sit in the same segment as, for example, my CEO, and so on. So I have to do segmentation. Segmentation is a very basic part of a security concept. So do the segmentation is very important. Once I was talking about the general perimeter. This is actually dividing the perimeter into smaller parts. Like then we can say about there is a data center perimeter, there is a network perimeter in general, there is a DMZ and so on, like the demilitarized zone, which is basically like a safe harbor for me when I'm connected the inside services and applications, let's say, with the outside world. And of course, the most or one of the most important part, it's gain the network visibility and analytics. If something happening in my network, I want to see and I want to know who was that, with what kind of device, and I'd like to log that for every single moment and always, and I want to be able to do the audit on that. So if someone made some mess, I just want to know who was that and why. How this approach or this model, security model, was extended later. They were tried thinking about more like a modern point of view, and they defined another 3 very important pillars: zero trust people, zero trust workloads, and zero trust data. Again, we are talking very paranoid about things. So we have to authenticate, we have to continuously monitor, we have to secure users as they interact with the internet, that's for sure. So this is depending on the people. Workloads, we have to be aware of every single application which is used in my network, and even more, we have to see what's coming in and out from the cloud, because once we open the network perimeter, which is on-prem, we are losing a lot of control what kind of services are used within the environment. So there are analytic tools which can basically do that for me, and I can just watch and check the alerts and do some restrictions. So that might help me to keep everything under control. And zero trust data, we have to securely manage the data for sure, categorize the data, develop the data classification scheme. What does it mean? We have to be able to sort important data, confidential data, I don't know, intellectual property from the rubbish, so we can focus on the important things and not lose time with the, I don't know, downloading music or videos, which is on my employee laptop. So this is a very important thing. And of course, encrypt data. This is what I said before. When we are build a form, the easiest possible, and like to compare the traditional security model with a zero trust model, it should probably look like that. So with the traditional one, which is basically most like threat-centric and not trust-centric, security is primarily focused on prevention and malware, malicious attacks. That's of course good, but it's not enough. We usually use the approach once the user or device is authorized, it stays like that for entire lifetime of the session. That's not good for sure. This is coming back to the dynamic policies, dynamic applications, what I was talking about before. Static policy. Policies are not aware of the current and past context, so I don't do any analytics how this user with that device was behaving before, and I'm not actually get that into account. And that's basically the information. Once I have that information, it's a very valuable one. Because if I have problematic user who might, I don't know, share the computer, which is basically corporate asset, and this employee is, for example, I don't know, using that laptop at home and share with the kids, and kids are, I don't know, browsing the internet, and they can get a lot of malicious stuff into it, and he's bringing that infected computer to my network periodically. I can have special policies for this type of users. So static policies are bad, not enough. And when it comes to zero trust, we do security focused on granting and restricting access to data. That's for sure, as I said, defined by your role or the role of the employee. The employee will get an access to those resources which should be available for that specific role. So if I'm CEO, I'll definitely get the access to my business applications, for sure. If I'm a lobby ambassador, I will not get access to that. Per transaction, so every user, device, and applications must be authenticated and authorized request per transaction. This is basically bringing us to the idea, and I like that idea. We were talking about the perimeter and one general thing. So there is one perimeter around my network. I think we are talking now by the deperimetrization that every single device has own perimeter. So I have to be sure that the device, the laptop or cell phone or the tablet, is secured enough. There is a perimeter around that, and that's like the completely deperimeterized this idea or the architecture. But it is like that. There is no perimeter anymore. And dynamic policies, policies adapt per user, per device. As I said, there might be various scenarios with the problematic users, with the problematic devices, with the problematic operation systems. I will be informed about that. As I have that information, I can define different and dynamic policies for that. Zero trust architecture, as I said, the idea is very simple, but there are more elements behind that. The three main parts are workforce. Those are like people, mostly. Workloads. Those are basically the data and transfers which we are used for our work, for our job. So applications and resources, which are usually stored in the data center or extended to the cloud. And workplace. Workplace, it's basically the environment where we are working. So might be office, might be home office, and so on. When it comes to how zero trust work, we are getting back to the idea I was trying to introduce a little bit before. We have to establish the trust first. So we use various services for that, like the multi-factor authentication for define a user specifically. We use context and identity of the user of the device. We use device posture. Might probably don't know what's that, but there are solutions who are allowing us to check your device, check your laptop, check your mobile phone against the known or the well-known vulnerabilities. And if there are some, you will be categorized and you will be basically right away noted as this device is not compliant for my network. How we use that? Usually there is an agent on the personal laptop or on the cell phone who sees the processes which are running on the background, the operation system, and it can check if the operation system it's patched, if you have latest service pack, if you have antivirus installed, if there is data encrypted on your laptop according to the organization policies and so on. And we can basically use all those relevant attributes for the context, and that context can be shared, spread through the security solutions we might use for the cybersecurity in my organization. So I can use that concept on the firewalls. I can use that context on the web and email security gateways and so on. We enforced the least privileged access to networks, applications, resources I was talking about. It's just like want to show how the chain looks like. And we continuously verify. Zero trust workforce. Those are people, and every single person, every single user should have some identification. The identification is checked by various solutions. As I said, multi-factor is one of them. Working with identity is very it's a very important part of the security now. The other thing, it's a workload, so we have to have visibility and tool for behavior modeling and see if there is not some specific activities or specific actions in my network which might lead to the breach. There are again various solutions for that, like every single transaction within the network has some, very simply saying, logs. There is it calls NetFlow, which is basically keeping all the information about it. If someone said to you in the past that everything what you do in the network or in the, let's say, digital world, it lasts some footprints. That's for sure, because all those logs are basically keeping that information, and we can use those logs. Simply saying logs, but there are like packets and net flows and stuff. I'm not gonna go deeper in that. And we can do those logs and do the analytics, and those analytics can give us a lot of information. Of course, this concept is saying be paranoid, but there are the different point of view, what's paranoid and allowed by the legacy and so on. But we have to do that, and there are tools for that. And of course, real-time security health of workloads. So we see if those applications, we can see the health of the applications, if they're working properly, if there is enough bandwidth for that, if the users who are using the applications are authorized for that. When we come to workplace, the first idea with the workplace is the segmentation, as I said. And we have to be aware what kind of devices are secured for me, what kind of devices has vulnerabilities, what are those vulnerabilities, and how risky they are for me. I'll jump to the practice because it's probably the most interesting part for you. How does it work? Let's imagine the employee who is coming to work, or basically you just wake up in the morning, you say, I work from home today, but I have to connect to my corporate network to access my business applications. So the first thing I do, I turn on my computer and I look for some VPN connection. The VPN connections brings me the service which can basically encrypt the traffic from my personal computer to my organization, which is the destination. And by that encrypted tunnel, I do the entire communication. But to establish the VPN connection, I have to identify myself first. For the identification, nowadays, we can use a lot of different approaches. The most common and very relevant for, let's say, this modern digital world, it's MFA, or two-factor authentication, or multi-factor authentication. It stays for the same. You can have that application on your smartwatches, on your smartphone, on your laptop as well. We usually use now like a fingerprints for that, or face recognition, and these kind of things. You will try to connect with the VPN. You will get the request on your personal device, like those watches on the phone. Identify yourself. You will use your fingerprint, or you will just point the phone to your face. It will be recognized. You prove your identity, and you go further. The application, which is providing you with a VPN connection, with a safe and secured connection from your personal device to your organization, gives you even more like that. You will do security checkup for your device. So if we'll check up if your, let's say if you use Apple iPhone, if your iOS is up to date, if there is a later version, it might have more vulnerabilities, and that might be a problem for the security checkup. It looks if your, I don't know, lock screen is enabled and stuff like that. Those are usually positioned by the organization policy, how they would like to have that. For example, within my company, I use my personal cell phone, but I have access to my work email, and I use with the sensitive data on my cell phone. So I'm part of the BYOD or MDM solution, as I was talking about before, and it requires, or it asks me for some specific things, like I have to have a little bit more complicated PIN. I have to have face recognition enabled. I have to have lock screen. So if I just left my my cell phone on the table somewhere, it should get locked within a couple of seconds, right? Because someone can use that, and these kind of things. So this security checkup can be done at the very moment when you are using the application, and you can go once this is done, and you go through it without any problems. You will get access to the network, and then the network sees you as the specific identity, and it will gives you and grant you the access by your role. So I'm the systems engineer. I have, or I should have, the access to those applications, to those servers, to those segments of a network, and I will get it. I will work with this identity now on, and always. I mean, if I, for example, trying to access the resources in California, because our headquarters is in California, I will be always identified by that identity I proved, or I get proven in the very first step. And it will ask me, of course, to refresh that identity somehow. There are various ways. Some of those might call single sign-on. You probably heard about. When you are using the business applications and you log once to one of those, and then you are accessing the another one, and the session is refreshed, and your identity is refreshed as well, and the system is sure it's you. The another application will not asks you for the credentials anymore. It will use single sign-on, so it will provide that authorization for you, like in between those systems. What we have to do for sure is monitor the segments. So usually the organization policies are saying there shouldn't be any communication in between two specific segments. I would say there is a data center where we run the applications for another customers, and there are internal employees who are sitting in the office, and there are basically no reason why those employees should access the data center. So I will set the policy. There shouldn't be any communication. We should have a tool when we are thinking like a zero trust way. We should have a solution which will basically check that for me. There are various solutions like that. Some of those might use those logs I was mentioning before, like a NetFlow analytics, and they will be able to say, they will be able to notify me if there is some problem with that, with the policy. What we can do for that, we can do micro-segmentation, and as I said, the identity of a user and device is very specific. We can do it even more specific. So in each entering the network, in each authentication and authorization, we can add security group tag to every single user and device, and it will get even more and more complicated. But I'm not going there.
What about the verification of the user? Is it also part of this when you're trying to register and they're asking you to upload your ID or passport?
Yeah. When we think about the enterprise world, usually always, every employee, as I'm the employee of CISCO Systems, I have that record inside the employee directory. Let's call it like that. Employee directory is a database where all the employees have their accounts stored, and those accounts has the various attributes. Like I'm the systems engineer, so there is my credential, like a login, my password, and behind that there is my role specifically described by the attributes. And I work basically with those credentials, with that particular accounts, and with those attributes as well to identify the specific person. And those credentials, we are usually use like a login and password, but that's pretty old approach. Like today, there are the services for us, like the fingerprint or the face recognition, who basically has that credentials stored inside, but I don't need to like write it down anymore or type it somewhere. I just need to provide with my specific identification thing, and that might be my finger, right, or my face. But as you said, yeah, this database is existing in the enterprise or organizational like networks, and we use them then always. We're using those databases always. Those are pre-integrated with the solutions, with the security solutions. And for example, if I see there is a guy with a laptop who just brought to my network some malicious code, I know exactly who was that, when he was connected, what is the role of that employee or that person, and I have a lot of information about the working station he's using. So that's the visibility I'm talking about during the entire presentation. The visibility, so I know who specifically is in my network, what is using, and what he is doing. Yes.
Yeah, but the problem about this, I know what he has done, not before he will do it. Like, I know what data in the database he accessed, what he stole, but the data is already somewhere in the space. So, like, I cannot go back, and I can fix the hole for next time, but I cannot really fix the data. It's like,
yeah.
When I tap your notebook, for example, you say you have to come through some identification, for example, your fingerprint or your face picture. But if I have already accessed the notebook, I can print your. If you have webcam, so I can make your photograph of your face anytime I want. I can, when I'm when I have control about. When I control your PC, I have all the information you are filling in already. So
yeah, but zero trust architecture model will not allow you to do this. That's the thing. There are various solutions who will not give you that access, who will not give you get into the network, and who will always ask you for your identification. Yes, you said if something happened, I have that logs and I can monitor and I see what happened. but that's not part of a zero trust architecture model. That's something which is very common with the traditional model. And if I have some monitoring tool, I can find out who was that. But zero trust security model will not allow you to do this. So it will always ask you, and it will do the prevention, right? That was the main idea in the beginning. It will do the prevention. So.
If I can add something, you were mostly talking about like a reactive posture about treating this attack. Of course, there's like a predictive approach. We could just dynamically use and mitigate this kind of risk. Like if you are accessing some different kind of data than you usually do, then as you already mentioned, your all policy rules will just say, okay, you can have even this, but nothing more. But still, there's some kind of risk. I think what is important to notice or mention is there can be mitigations. It could work pretty well, but it will not work safely in 100% of time.
Yeah, that's for sure. There is not solution who
Like
will.
it's like some kind
Yeah,
of,
there is not solution which will protect you like 100% for sure. And
and then comes this kind of attacks. So okay, we can mitigate these risks, but they are still here, and we have like to be prepared.
I didn't go through specific solutions we used for that, but of course, artificial intelligence or behavioral analytics, those are the parts we use now. And we can predict a lot of events which might happen or which might be into preparation phase. And we can stop that before it happens. But for sure, there is, let's say, 1% of the events cannot be mitigated in time. And but it's always good when we have all those logs and when we do like a continuous monitoring, and we can remediate the environment faster and safer later. But yeah, the zero trust is talking about. Here we go. About the identification. The ID is extremely important, but trustworthiness of the endpoint also. I mean, that's the point. What you can protect, basically you cannot protect what you can see. And that's the main idea. Why is that important for me? The many organizations and also a lot of my customers I'm meeting daily these days, they have very nice protection and very modern, let's say, firewalls with intrusion prevention systems and file scanning. They do the file analytics in the isolated sandbox environments and stuff, but they don't have sorted out the identity. I think the identity is the core of the knowledge I basically have, and I can basically use and apply when it comes to cybersecurity solution in general. So the zero trust architecture is talking about the ID and to be aware of everything I have or what is wanted to access to my network. So it's pretty simple, and it has some steps which has to be done, like in a chain. There is a user trust. I have to know, and I need to know what is the user. Is that my user is the trusted user, and by the role I will give him the access. I have to be aware of the device he or she's using. I have to keep that visibility and enable the access. And I'm working with that contextual data I have from these initial actions for entire life cycle of that user is using the services within my network. Okay, I'm not gonna keep you longer. I just want to say, if you'd like to know more about computer networking, if you'd like to know more about what is happening on the background when you're using your laptops, your internet, your favorite internet destinations stuff, just don't be hesitate to look for CISCO Networking Academy, which is also at this uni. And they will probably very gladly give you more information how you can register for those courses and learn more. I mean, in the end of the lectures, CISCO Networking Academy, you can get certification, and that certification is very valuable later on for you, and the employer will see you differently as the many other many other your ex-colleagues or your ex-classmates who will not that proactive, let's say, approach and attend stuff like that. I definitely recommend. I went through Networking Academy as well during my uni time, and most of my colleagues. So there are opportunities for you also in your university, Osaka University as well. And in the end, the last slide, I have a couple of links for you. If you'd like to find out more about not only about zero trust architecture, but also how the security looks like as a concept, just visit one of those sites. If you'd like to check and see what is happening now with cybersecurity and what's on in the digital world as it is, definitely look for where it is cybersecurity reports. Those are annual, and you can basically get a lot of detailed information, what kind of attacks was noticed, or what is the problem with the cybercrime these days. Yep. And if you like to learn more from your own and do some self-study, there is also like a CISCO Live portal where you can look for on-demand library and find out your favorite topic. I mean, security might not be favorite for every one of you. You might like more to see how the modern collaboration is done, for example. How we can do, I don't know, VR meeting spaces. That's pretty cool as well. You can look for that information in the CISCO Live portal. So thank you for your attendance, for your patience. And we might see each other next semester, maybe. Thanks.